I love when people are able to demystify this work because it makes it more accessible and hopefully makes more people feel like they can hop in. So that's awesome. Our next speaker is a champion of open source and open governance. As executive director of the JS Foundation, Kris leads the charge on broadening adoption and development of key JavaScript technologies and solutions. So let's welcome Kris Borchers.
Tracy. Hey, everybody. Yeah, this has been a good couple of days, right? So yeah, what I want to talk about is just what the JS Foundation is doing for the JavaScript ecosystem, and really highlight some of the projects we support that help developers like yourselves sort of use Node.js to its full capability. So who, and this may be a little more rhetorical, but like, can anybody guess what this is? What's that? So what this is the dependency tree for one of our projects. And it's actually not the entire thing. So it does include dependencies and dev dependencies. But I had to cut it off at about 2 layers of dev dependencies because then the tool broke. So we can see, so I zoomed in a little bit here so you can kind of see then it's calling out some of the different projects. And the ones that are highlighted are actually other JS Foundation projects that this project depends on. So we'll do one more. How about this one? Actually, that's just a map of the internet. But the point is, you probably thought that was a dependency tree for a project, right? So where we're going with this is that the JavaScript ecosystem is massive, right? So what we're trying to do is support some of those, like Tracy was saying in the intro, some of the key projects or the projects that people really depend on in their development. So this is our mission. I'm not going to read through this, but it's there if you want to read it later. But I kind of distilled it down, at least some of the key points that I want to talk about today. And really what it's about is supporting end-to-end JavaScript solutions and providing guidance and infrastructure for those through their entire life cycle. So I kind of wanted to highlight some things about how projects have a life cycle. And a lot of times people don't want to talk about kind of that right-hand side, right, where projects do eventually die. But it takes a while to get there, sometimes a really long time to get there. And so what we want to do is try to help these projects sort of maximize their support and then use that to support other projects, which is why the JS Foundation is more of a umbrella organization that has a lot of projects. So what we want to try to do is instead of this kind of slow grow into a maintain and sustain and then die off, what the JS Foundation tries to do is maximize that investment from organizations and developers early, get a lot of people involved, and really get that project supported. And what that does is it helps us sort of guide that project through its life cycle. And then what we can do is, if we take a step back, is at the JS Foundation, because we're an umbrella, these projects aren't on their own, right? So eventually, a project, as it kind of gets over that peak, is now struggling to get investment, whether that's financial investment or developer time from organizations. And so what we do is bring in other projects. And so some of that financial investment for these projects that are kind of on their upswing can help support and provide infrastructure and things like that for these projects as they kind of move through that typical life cycle. And so the JS Foundation projects span this entire life cycle. So one of the main things that we provide projects is guidance. And so when you're trying to get involved in open source projects or when you're running a project or whatever, it kind of feels like this intersection, right? Like it works, but I don't really know how, and but we kind of make it out okay on the other side. And so what we've created is this mentorship program for our projects. And it has some sort of key tenets that we try to instill in our projects to help them be supported for the long term. So making sure they're inclusive, making sure that they're bringing people in and including them in the process, and empowering them early. We also really stress transparency. So one of the things, if you were in the sort of maintainer therapy session just a little bit ago, one of the things that I called out in that session was this idea of write it down. How do I go from using your project to contributing to your project to being a maintainer on your project? Write it down. Because if you give developers a path, they'll follow it. If you don't, they kind of, some figure it out, but most are just like, well, I don't really know how to help, so I won't. And then just ensuring that these projects are effective, right? So making sure that they have solid code bases, well tested. And what that leads to is this idea of a long-term sustainable project. So from our mentorship program, we actually have 2 projects now that have graduated. And so Appium was the first, and then just earlier this morning, we announced that ESLint also graduated from our mentorship program. So if you're looking for examples of what we think is a good way to run your project and organize your project for long-term sustainability, definitely check out kind of how those projects are doing things. We have 10 other projects currently in the mentorship process. And so it's everything from Arc, which is a serverless architecture tool, to Webpack and all kinds of projects in between. So the JS Foundation itself actually has, right now, 27 projects. And it's literally, it touches every part of sort of the technology world, from IoT to cloud to client to server. We have projects that are all over the place. And so that goes back to that idea of we have projects that are on their upswing, kind of new hot projects, and those projects are helping sustain some of those projects that have been around a long time and people still use them all the time, but maybe aren't garnering that investment. So the other thing that we called out was infrastructure. A lot of times when we talk about infrastructure, people do typically think about sort of like that underpinning technology, servers, et cetera. And we do provide those types of things. The foundation actually, and thanks to one of our members, StackPath, provides the jQuery CDN, which jQuery still averages about 15,000 hits a second to the CDN, which we could never pay for. And so StackPath provides that. And then we do offer free infrastructure, free servers to a number of our projects. So we currently maintain about 30 or so servers for the different projects for CI and whatever they use them for. We also register domains for them, certificates, all of that, so that these maintainers don't have to pay for these things out of their pocket. Something people don't typically think about, though, in terms of open source, their open source projects and infrastructure that you need, is around sort of legal support. And so that's another big thing that we do for our projects. We have our CLA tracker that is currently tracking contributions from about 3,000 contributors across the different projects. Thanks to FOSSA, we provide free license scanning. So that's one that it's actually a really tricky problem in the JavaScript space. We saw that huge dependency tree, right? How do you know every license of every project that you're depending on, right? And so FOSSA helps us keep track of that. And then we also do trademark registration. So all of our projects, or most of our projects, have logos and names, and we actually file trademark registrations and protect those to keep those projects protected. So like I said, we couldn't do this without our members. So these are the organizations that are currently supporting our work. But I think really just the key here is there's a lot that goes on in the background to support a lot of these projects. It does sometimes cost money. A lot of times what we really need is developer time from a lot of these companies. So with that, since I'm about out of time, we really appreciate the Node.js project and the foundation for letting us partner with them and offer some of our content from some of our projects and let me get up here and talk to you for a few minutes. But with that, I will say thank you.